Tell us, from which country or city are you watching today? We enjoy connecting with our global audience. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. Thanksgiving Charade. The Hargrove Mansion sprawled across 5 acres of manicured landscape in the Hamptons, a testament to the family's 3 generations of wealth and influence. Inside, Thanksgiving dinner had concluded, and the air was thick with the scent of pumpkin pie and pretension. Broderick Hargrove, CEO of Hargrove Technologies, stood at the head of the dining table, swirling his 30-year-old scotch. Another successful quarter, he announced to his assembled family. Stock up 17%. The board couldn't be happier. At the other end of the table, Preston Davenport was quietly stacking dishes. His wife of 8 years, Valerie Hargrove Davenport, Broderick's only daughter, didn't even look at him as she sipped her champagne. "Leave some for the housekeeper," Preston, his mother-in-law Constance, said with a thin smile. "Martina will be upset if you take all her work." "No, Mother, let him," Valerie replied, loud enough for everyone to hear. "At least he's good for something." The table erupted in laughter, and Preston's grip tightened on the china. 8 years of these barbs. 8 years of being the family joke. The failed novelist who married into money. What none of them knew was that Preston Davenport was merely a carefully constructed identity. His phone vibrated in his pocket. Excusing himself to the kitchen, he glanced at the screen. "Sir, your jet is fueled and ready. The acquisition team awaits your final authorization." Preston took a deep breath and typed, "Execute." He returned to the dining room, where Broderick was now reminiscing about his latest business conquest. Poor Sullivan never saw it coming. By the time he realized what was happening, I'd stripped his company for parts. "Preston," Valerie called out, "tell everyone about your latest rejection letter." Before he could respond, his phone rang again. He answered, aware of the annoyed looks from his in-laws. "I apologize, but this requires immediate attention," he said, stepping away from the table. "For God's sake, what could possibly be so urgent in your life?" Broderick laughed. "Another publisher rejecting your manuscript?" Preston ignored him and took the call. His assistant's voice was clear and precise. "It's done, sir. Orbital Technologies is now yours." The board voted unanimously. "Thank you, Abigail. Proceed with Phase 2. When he returned, something had changed in his demeanor. He placed the plates down and, without a word, walked toward the door. "Where do you think you're going?" Valerie called after him. "I've endured enough for one evening," he replied without turning. "Don't be so sensitive," his wife snapped. "It's Thanksgiving. You're embarrassing me." Preston paused at the door. "I believe you've done enough of that for both of us over the years." He left without another word, ignoring Valerie's angry calls. As his car pulled away from the mansion, he removed the plain gold wedding band from his finger and placed it in his pocket. The charade was finally ending. Later that night, as he sat in his private jet crossing the Atlantic, Preston, whose real name was Barrett Caldwell, watched the news break on his tablet. Breaking news: mysterious tech mogul acquires Orbital Technologies in surprise takeover. CEO Broderick Hargrove unavailable for comment as shares tumble. His phone lit up with Valerie's name for the 12th time. He answered on the final ring. "Barrett, what's going on?" "My father is having a meltdown. The news is saying someone called Phoenix Capital just bought Orbital. That's their flagship company." "Is it?" he replied calmly. "Don't play dumb. There's reporters outside our house. They're asking about some billionaire called Barrett Caldwell. They're saying he owns Phoenix Capital." Barrett allowed himself a small smile. "How interesting." "Barrett, whatever joke this is, it isn't funny. My father—" "Your father," he interrupted, "should have been more careful about who he invited to his table." "What are you talking about?" 8 years, Valerie. 8 years, I played the part of the disappointing son-in-law, the failed writer, the joke. The silence on the other end was deafening. "Barrett, please tell me this isn't what I think it is." "It's exactly what you think it is, and it's only the beginning." He ended the call and turned off his phone. Phase 1 was complete, and the Hargroves had no idea what was coming next. Chapter 2. The Man Behind the Mask. 3 days after the Thanksgiving incident, Barrett Caldwell sat in his Tokyo penthouse office, watching the financial news with quiet satisfaction. The reporter's voice was animated with excitement. Hargrove Technologies stock continues its free fall following the loss of their flagship division. Inside sources report emergency board meetings as investors demand answers. Barrett turned to the floor-to-ceiling windows, taking in the sprawling cityscape. Tokyo was just one of a dozen cities where he maintained residences, all unknown to the woman who called herself his wife. His executive assistant, Naomi Takahashi, entered with a tablet in hand. Unlike Barrett's fabricated identity as struggling writer Preston Davenport, Naomi knew exactly who he was. Founder and CEO of Phoenix Innovations, with a personal net worth of $17.2 billion. The transfer of Orbital's assets is complete, she reported. And as you predicted, Broderick Hargrove has called an emergency press conference for this afternoon. Perfect timing, Barrett replied. And Valerie? She's tried contacting all your known aliases. She's also hired a private investigator. Barrett smiled. Whoever she hired won't find anything I don't want them to find. Naomi hesitated. Sir, there's something else. Your sister called. Barrett's expression hardened. Talia knows not to contact me directly. She says it's important. Something about Valerie reaching out to her. Barrett considered this development. His younger sister Talia was the only family he had left, and she was the sole person who knew both sides of his life, Preston Davenport and Barrett Caldwell. Arrange a secure call. Hours later, as Barrett prepared for a video conference with his global executive team, the wall-mounted screen in his office displayed his sister's face. Talia Caldwell had the same striking blue eyes as her brother, but where his expression was calculated, hers was open and concerned. 8 years, Barrett, she began without preamble. 8 years of this ridiculous double life, and now you're finally making your move. You knew this day would come, he replied calmly. Valerie called me in tears. She thinks you've had some kind of mental breakdown. Barrett's laugh was hollow. Of course she does. The idea that her loser husband could be anything more than what she believed is inconceivable to her. She wants to know if I've heard from you. What am I supposed to tell her? Nothing. This doesn't concern you, Talia. His sister's expression hardened. You made it concern me when you spent nearly a decade living a lie. Do you have any idea what it's been like watching you debase yourself in front of those people? Pretending I barely know my own brother at their social functions? It was necessary. Was it, or did you just want to make Broderick Hargrove suffer the way Dad did? Barrett's jaw tightened. The mention of their father always struck a nerve. Nicholas Caldwell had been a brilliant engineer whose revolutionary quantum processing design was stolen by a young, ambitious Broderick Hargrove in the late 1990s. The theft had destroyed their father, leading to a spiral of depression that ended with his suicide when Barrett was just 19 and Talia 14. This isn't just about Dad, Barrett insisted. Then what is it about? Revenge? Is that why you married Valerie? Was she just collateral damage in your vendetta against her father? Barrett didn't answer immediately. The truth was complicated. He had initially approached Valerie 8 years ago with revenge in mind, but something unexpected had happened. He found himself genuinely falling for her. For a brief moment, he considered abandoning his plan, until he discovered what kind of person she truly was. Valerie made her own choices, he finally said. She showed me exactly who she is. Talia shook her head. Whatever she did, this elaborate scheme. 3 months into our marriage, Barrett interrupted, I discovered she was still seeing her ex-boyfriend. 6 months in, I found out she only married me because her father convinced her I was a useful idiot, a harmless diversion while she waited for someone worthy of the Hargrove name. Talia's expression softened. Barry, I didn't know. No one knew. I played my part. The pathetic husband. The failed writer struggling to finish a novel that would never be published. All while building Phoenix into what it is today. And now I take everything. Hargrove built his empire on the back of our father's work. It's time he learned what it feels like to have everything stripped away. We'll bring Dad back. Talia asked softly. Barrett looked away. No, but it will bring justice. And that's something. As the call ended, Barrett returned to the panoramic view of Tokyo. The first pieces of his revenge were in motion, but the real game was just beginning. Chapter 3. The Betrayal. Barrett sat in the dimly lit hotel bar in Geneva, nursing a scotch as he waited. The soft jazz playing in the background did little to calm his thoughts. It had been 2 weeks since Thanksgiving, and the business world was still reeling from Phoenix Capital's aggressive moves against Hardgrove Technologies. Mr. Caldwell, a man in an impeccable suit, approached his table. Wesley Bennett, from Kingston Security. Your assistant arranged our meeting. Barrett gestured to the chair across from him. What do you have for me? Bennett placed a sleek tablet on the table. Everything you requested on Mrs. Davenport. Or should I say, Mrs. Caldwell? I'm still not clear on which name you prefer. Just show me what you found. Bennett swiped through a series of images. Your wife has been quite busy since your disappearance. Most notably, her relationship with this man. The screen showed Valerie entering a luxury hotel, followed by a tall man with salt and pepper hair. Trevor Maxwell, Bennett explained, Chief Operating Officer at Hardgrove Technologies and your father-in-law's right-hand man for the past 15 years. Barrett's expression remained neutral, but his knuckles whitened around his glass. How long? Based on our surveillance and electronic records, approximately 3 years. 3 years. Half of their marriage. Barrett had suspected Valerie's infidelity, but seeing the evidence still felt like a punch to the gut. There's more, Bennett continued, swiping to a new set of files. We accessed her private communications as requested. It appears Mrs. Caldwell and Mr. Maxwell have been discussing more than their affair. Barrett scanned the messages displayed on the screen, his face growing colder with each line. The conversations between Valerie and Trevor detailed not just their relationship, but their laughter at his expense, their plans for after she finally divorced the pathetic writer, and, most damning of all, discussions about Barrett's potential inheritance from his late uncle, which Valerie had been quietly investigating. They believe that might come into money, Barrett said quietly. Bennett nodded. From what we gathered, Mrs. Caldwell has been encouraging you to maintain contact with your uncle's attorney for that very reason. The uncle in question was entirely fictional, a story Barrett had crafted years ago as a test. He'd mentioned the possibility of an inheritance to Valerie during a vulnerable moment, swearing her to secrecy. Clearly, she had not only betrayed that confidence, but had been actively plotting to secure any potential windfall. There's one more thing you should see, Bennett said, pulling up a final file. This is from a meeting at Hardgrove Technologies 3 days ago. The video showed Broderick Hardgrove in his office with Valerie and Trevor. The audio was crystal clear. This disappeared husband of yours has become a liability, Broderick was saying. First, he embarrasses us by walking out of Thanksgiving dinner, and now he's somehow connected to the company trying to destroy us. Daddy, I had no idea, Valerie pleaded. Preston, or Barrett, or whatever his name is, he kept me completely in the dark. That's hard to believe, Valerie, Trevor interjected. You lived with the man for 8 years. Are you serious right now? Valerie's voice rose. You know exactly what kind of marriage we had. He was nothing, a placeholder. You, and I always knew that. Broderick slammed his hand on the desk. Regardless, we need to contain this situation. If the press gets wind that my daughter's husband is the same Barrett Caldwell who's dismantling our company, the shareholders will panic even more. What do you suggest? Trevor asked. We use Valerie. She plays the heartbroken, betrayed wife. We file for divorce immediately, citing abandonment and mental instability. We get ahead of the story. The video ended, and Barrett sat in silence for a long moment. Will that be all, Mr. Caldwell? Bennett asked. Barrett finished his drink and stood. Find me everything on Trevor Maxwell. Every skeleton, every weakness, every pressure point. And I want daily updates on all 3 of them. Understood. And if I may ask, what's your next move? Barrett's smile was cold. Now that I know all the players, it's time to change the game. 2 days later, Barrett sat in his Milan office as Naomi briefed him on the latest developments. Hardgrove Technologies had announced a strategic partnership with their Chinese counterparts to mitigate the damage from losing Orbital. The stock had temporarily stabilized. They're adapting faster than we anticipated, Naomi noted. It won't matter, Barrett replied. Broderick thinks he's weathering the storm, but he doesn't realize it hasn't even begun yet. His phone chimed with a message from Talia. Valerie's going public tomorrow. Press conference scheduled at HT headquarters. She's filing for divorce. Barrett forwarded the message to Naomi. Make sure our media contacts are ready. It's time for phase 2. Are you sure about this? Once we release the evidence of her affair with Maxwell, there's no going back. The personal aspects of your revenge will be public. Barrett stared at the Hargrove Technologies logo displayed on his wall-mounted screen. 8 years ago, Broderick Hargrove took me aside at his daughter's engagement party. He told me he knew exactly who I was, not the struggling writer I pretended to be, but the son of Nicholas Caldwell. He laughed in my face, said my father was weak, and that I was just as pathetic for thinking I could infiltrate his family. But he still allowed the marriage? Because he didn't see me as a threat. He thought I was exactly what I appear to be, broken and bitter, seeking some petty revenge by marrying his daughter. He even encouraged Valerie to go through with it, convinced I could never harm them. Barrett turned to Naomi, his eyes cold. He was wrong. And now they all pay. Broderick for destroying my father, Valerie for her betrayal, and Trevor for thinking he could take what's mine. As Naomi left, Barrett opened his safe and removed an old photograph of his father standing proudly in his lap. Next to it was a faded newspaper clipping announcing Hargrove's breakthrough in quantum processing. It won't be long now, Dad, he whispered to the photo. Everything they built on your work is about to crumble, and I'll be there to watch it fall. Chapter 4, Opening Moves. The press conference was a masterclass in manufactured sympathy. Valerie Hargrove Davenport stood beside her father outside Hargrove Technologies headquarters, her eyes skillfully reddened, her voice breaking at precisely the right moments. I'm devastated to learn that my husband, the man I loved and supported for 8 years, has been living a double life, she told the assembled reporters. Not only did Preston, or Barrett, as he apparently prefers, abandon our marriage without warning, but he's now using his resources to attack my family's company. Barrett watched the performance from his London penthouse, unmoved by her crocodile tears. Beside him sat Lauren Sullivan, former CEO of Sullivan Quantum Systems, another victim of Broderick Hargrove's ruthless business tactics years earlier. She's good, Sullivan remarked. If I didn't know better, I'd actually believe she was the wronged party. Hargrove's daughter through and through, Barrett replied. Appearances are everything to them. On screen, Broderick stepped forward to support his distraught daughter. We filed for divorce on Valerie's behalf, citing abandonment and extreme emotional distress. As for Mr. Caldwell's attacks on Hargrove Technologies, we view them as the vindictive actions of a disturbed individual with a personal vendetta. A reporter shouted from the crowd. Is it true Barrett Caldwell is the son of Nicholas Caldwell, whose work on quantum processing formed the foundation of Hargrove's early success? Broderick's face tightened almost imperceptibly. Nicholas Caldwell was a talented engineer who worked for me briefly in the 1990s. Any implication that his contributions were more significant than that is simply false. Now, if you'll excuse us, my daughter has been through enough today. As they retreated from the podium, Barrett turned to Sullivan. And now we respond. Within minutes, major financial news outlets received an anonymous data dump. Emails, text messages, hotel receipts, and photographs documenting Valerie's 3-year affair with Trevor Maxwell. Simultaneously, a statement from Phoenix Innovations announced Barrett Caldwell as its founder and CEO, confirming his identity as Valerie's husband, but offering no further comment on personal matters. Barrett's phone rang almost immediately. It was Talia. Was that necessary? She demanded without preamble. The affair, the photos, you've humiliated her publicly. She humiliated herself, Barrett replied coldly. I simply provided the evidence. This isn't like you, Barry. You don't know what I've become, Talia. 8 years playing a role changes a man. His sister's voice softened. I understand you're hurt. This isn't about hurt feelings, Barrett cut her off. This is business. The personal elements are simply leverage. After ending the call, Barrett turned to Sullivan. Are you ready for the next phase? Sullivan nodded grimly. My team has identified the weak points in the Chinese partnership. Their regulatory approvals are contingent on intellectual property assurances that Hargrove can't possibly fulfill. Good. Push that angle with the regulatory bodies. I want that partnership collapsing within the week. As Sullivan left to execute the plan, Barrett received a notification that Valerie was calling, this time on his real phone number, which she'd never had access to before. "How did you get this number?" he answered. "Your sister," Valerie replied, her voice raw. "Barrett, what you've done, the photos, the messages, all authentic, as you well know. You've destroyed my reputation." Barrett laughed, without humor. "Your reputation? That's what concerns you? Not the fact that you've been sleeping with your father's COO for 3 years? Not the lies you've told? Not the mockery you've made of our marriage? Our marriage was a sham from the beginning," she hissed. "You married me under false pretenses. You lied about who you were." "As did you," Barrett replied calmly. "The difference is I never betrayed you. I never humiliated you. I played my role perfectly, while you couldn't even maintain the basic decency of fidelity. What do you want from us, Barrett? Money? Is that it? Name your price and end this vendetta." "Money." Barrett's voice turned cold. "I have more wealth than your family could dream of. This isn't about money, Valerie. This is about justice." "For your father? That was 30 years ago." "For my father. For myself. For every person your father has stepped on and destroyed on his way to the top." "Please," Valerie's voice cracked. "Whatever my father did, whatever I did, it can't be worth all this." For a brief moment, Barrett felt a flicker of the connection they'd once shared, before he'd discovered her true nature. He pushed it aside ruthlessly. "It's worth everything," he said quietly. "And we're just getting started." The following morning, Barrett met with his legal team in Zurich to review the latest developments. The Chinese partnership was already showing signs of strain, with regulatory questions being raised in Beijing. "Broderick will be desperate for a lifeline," Barrett told his chief counsel, Simone Rossi. "That's when we offer one, through a series of shell companies unconnected to Phoenix." "And the terms?" Rossi asked. "Superficially generous. Deep ownership transfers disguised as minor concessions. By the time he realizes what he's signed, it will be too late." As the meeting concluded, Barrett received a message from an unexpected source. Trevor Maxwell wanted to meet. "Interesting," Barrett murmured. "Set it up," he told his assistant. "Neutral location. Full security protocols." 3 days later, Barrett sat in a private dining room of a Geneva restaurant, waiting. When Trevor Maxwell entered, he looked significantly less polished than in his press appearances. Dark circles under his eyes, his designer suit slightly rumpled. "Mr. Caldwell," Trevor began, extending his hand. Barrett ignored the gesture. "You have 10 minutes. Trevor sat down, visibly uncomfortable. "I want to offer a truce." "A truce implies we're at war." "This isn't war, Mr. Maxwell. This is extermination." Trevor paled. "Look, I understand you're angry about Valerie and me." "You understand nothing," Barrett interrupted. "My wife's infidelity is merely a symptom of a greater disease. You, Valerie, Broderick, you're all cut from the same cloth. Entitled, corrupt, believing yourselves untouchable." "I can help you," Trevor insisted. "I have information, things about Broderick that could give you the leverage you need without destroying the company." Barrett studied him carefully. "You're offering to betray your mentor? Your friend's father? The man who made your career?" "I'm being practical. Hargrove Technologies employs thousands of people. Your vendetta threatens all of them." "How noble of you to suddenly care about the employees," Barrett remarked sarcastically. "Tell me, did you think about those people when you and Broderick were driving Sullivan to suicide? Or when you stripped Newton Medical of its patents, leaving their research team jobless?" Trevor shifted uncomfortably. "Business is business." "Precisely. And this is business. My business." Barrett stood. "Your 10 minutes are up." "Wait." Trevor reached into his jacket and pulled out a flash drive. "At least look at what I have, for the sake of the innocent people caught in the crossfire." Barrett took the drive, pocketing it without comment. "A word of advice, Mr. Maxwell. Start updating your resume. You're going to need it." As Barrett left the restaurant, he called Naomi. "Have the security team analyze Maxwell's drive. I want to know if there's anything useful on it. And step up surveillance on him. He's getting desperate, which makes him dangerous." "Understood. And sir, there's been a development with your sister." Valerie reached out to her again. asking for help in arranging a meeting with you. Barrett frowned. Talia knows better than to facilitate that. She said to tell you that she thinks you should hear what Valerie has to say. Something about ending this before it destroys you too. Barrett ended the call without responding. His sister's concern was misplaced. There was nothing left of him to destroy. Preston Davenport, the vulnerable man who might have once loved Valerie, had never really existed. And Barrett Caldwell was forged in fire, immune to the emotional manipulation Valerie was so skilled at deploying. Or so he told himself as his car sped through the Swiss countryside, carrying him further along the path of his meticulously planned revenge. Chapter 5. The Counterattack. The Hargrove Empire was beginning to crack. Over the next week, Barrett watched from his New York apartment as the Chinese partnership collapsed under regulatory scrutiny. Hargrove Technologies' stock plummeted another 22%, and rumors of layoffs spread through the industry. "They're taking the bait," Naomi reported, handing Barrett the latest financial analysis. "Broderick has reached out to Meridian Capital for emergency funding." Barrett smiled thinly. Meridian was one of his shell companies, created precisely for this purpose. And their board split. Half want to accept Meridian's terms. Half are pushing to explore other options. Maxwell is leading the resistance. Interesting. Barrett pulled up the analysis from Trevor's flash drive on his tablet. Maxwell's information was actually valuable. Detailed breakdowns of Hargrove's vulnerabilities, contingency plans, even Broderick's personal financial arrangements. "He's more desperate than I thought. Or setting a trap," Naomi suggested. "Perhaps, which is why we'll proceed carefully." Barrett forwarded a set of instructions to his team. Have Sullivan approach their board members individually. Focus on those with the most to lose. As Barrett put his plans in motion, the media frenzy around his identity and the Hargrove family drama intensified. Business magazines rushed to profile the invisible billionaire who had built a tech empire in secret while posing as a struggling writer. Social media exploded with memes about Valerie's affair and the spectacular unraveling of her public image. Through it all, Barrett remained silent, neither confirming nor denying the wildest speculations. His silence only fueled further interest, which served his purposes perfectly. Every headline about him was another blow to the Hargrove's reputation. His phone chimed with a message from Talia. "She's not going away, Barry. Either meet with Valerie, or I'll bring her to you myself." Barrett grimaced. His sister's persistence was becoming problematic. Before he could respond, the secure line on his desk rang, the direct connection to his operations center. "Sir, we have a situation," his security chief reported. "There's been an attempt to breach our Paris servers. The attack signature matches Hargrove's cybersecurity division." "Escalation," Barrett murmured. "They're getting desperate. Lock down all sensitive data and prepare countermeasures." "There's more," the security chief continued. "We've intercepted communications suggesting they're planning to go public with allegations about your father. They're constructing a narrative that Nicholas Caldwell stole the quantum processing designs from Hargrove, not the other way around." Barrett's hand tightened around the phone. "They would drag my father's name through the mud? After everything they've already taken from him?" "It appears to be Maxwell's strategy, sir. He's convinced Broderick it's their best chance at turning public opinion." "Initiate blackout protocol," Barrett ordered, his voice dangerously calm. "And tell Simone I want the Maxwell contingency activated immediately." The blackout protocol was Barrett's most aggressive cybersecurity measure, a complete shutdown of Phoenix's public-facing systems coupled with a covert counterattack on the aggressor's infrastructure. Meanwhile, the Maxwell contingency was a plan Barrett had developed specifically for Trevor, targeting him personally rather than professionally. Within hours, Hargrove Technologies experienced a series of technical difficulties that took down their internal communications, while Trevor Maxwell discovered that his private bank accounts had been frozen pending a regulatory investigation into unexplained fund transfers. Transfers that Phoenix's team had fabricated but made appear completely authentic. Barrett was reviewing the chaos when Naomi entered his office, her expression grave. "Sir, your sister and Mrs. Caldwell are downstairs. They're insisting on seeing you." Barrett looked up sharply. "Here?" How do they even find this location? Ms. Caldwell says she's always known about this apartment. She tracked your movements years ago, but never mentioned it out of respect for your privacy. Barrett closed his eyes briefly. Talia had always been too clever for her own good. Send them up, but stay close. Minutes later, Talia entered with Valerie close behind. His sister looked determined, while Valerie appeared haggard, a far cry from the polished socialite she normally presented to the world. This ends now, Talia announced without preamble. You two are going to talk like adults. Barrett remained seated behind his desk. There's nothing to discuss. I disagree, Valerie said, her voice steadier than her appearance suggested. You're destroying lives, Barrett. Not just mine or my father's, but thousands of innocent employees. Don't pretend to care about the employees now, Barrett replied coldly. You never spared them a thought before. Maybe not, Valerie admitted, surprising him. But I'm thinking about them now, and about what this vendetta is doing to you. To me, Barrett laughed. I'm executing a business strategy. Clinical. Efficient. You're tearing apart your own life in the process, Talia interjected. This obsession is consuming you. Barrett turned to his sister. You don't understand what they did. To Dad? I understand perfectly, Talia countered. I lost him too, remember? But this, she gestured around his sterile office, this isn't justice. It's poison. Valerie stepped forward. I didn't know about your father when we met. I didn't know who you really were. But I did care for you, Barrett, the real you that sometimes slipped through your present facade. Convenient rewriting of history, Barrett replied. Your affair with Trevor tells a different story. I won't defend that, Valerie said quietly. It was wrong, but it happened after years of living with a man who seemed to care more about his unfinished novel than about me. A man who flinched when I touched him, who disappeared for days claiming to be researching. I thought you didn't love me. I thought I was trapped in a loveless marriage. Because it was, Barrett snapped. It was a business arrangement from the beginning. Nothing more. Then why did you stay for 8 years? Talia asked. Your plan could have been executed much sooner. The question hit Barrett like a physical blow. Why had he stayed? The original plan had been to gain access to Hargrove Technologies through the marriage, gather the evidence he needed about his father's stolen work, then execute his revenge within 2 or 3 years at most. But something had changed. Those early years with Valerie, before he discovered her true nature, had been real, at least for him. It doesn't matter now, Barrett said finally. Too many lines have been crossed. Too much damage done. Then what do you want? Valerie asked. Complete destruction? Will that bring you peace? Peace was never the objective, Barrett replied. Justice was, is. At what cost? Talia pressed. Look at yourself, Barry. When was the last time you felt anything but anger? When was the last time you created something instead of destroying it? Barrett stood abruptly. This meeting is over. Naomi will show you out. As they turned to leave, Valerie paused. They're going after your father's reputation tomorrow. Trevor convinced the board it's their only option. I thought you should know. After they left, Barrett stood at his window, looking out over the city lights. His phone buzzed with updates from his team. Hargrove was indeed preparing a press offensive scheduled for the morning. They had constructed an elaborate narrative painting Nicholas Caldwell as a troubled, unstable engineer who had attempted to steal Broderick's work before being dismissed. It was the final insult. Barrett had tolerated the theft of his father's legacy, endured personal humiliation, even accepted Valerie's betrayal. But he would not allow them to desecrate his father's memory. Naomi, he called his decision made. Activate Phoenix Protocol. All targets. No restrictions. Naomi's eyes widened. Sir, Phoenix Protocol is our nuclear option. There's no coming back from that. I'm aware. Barrett's voice was ice. They've made their choice. Now they'll face the consequences. As Naomi left to execute his orders, Barrett opened his safe and removed a small wooden box containing his father's old pocket watch. Nicholas Caldwell had carried it every day until his death. You were right about one thing, Dad, he murmured, running his thumb over the worn surface. There are some battles that can't be won with kindness. The Phoenix Protocol was Barrett's most devastating contingency plan, a simultaneous multi-pronged attack on every aspect of the Hargrove empire, from business to personal. By morning, there would be nothing left but ashes. And from those ashes, Barrett would complete his revenge. Chapter 6. Point of No Return. At 4:37 a.m. Eastern Time, the Phoenix Protocol unleashed digital hell on the Hargrove Empire. Barrett watched from his command center, a secure room in his Manhattan penthouse filled with monitors displaying real-time data from around the world. Phase 1 complete, his chief technology officer reported. All Hargrove Technologies systems successfully infiltrated. We have control of their internal communications, financial records, and research databases. Barrett nodded, his face illuminated by the blue glow of the screens. Begin Phase 2. Release the documents to all major financial publications. Within minutes, journalists across the globe received explosive evidence of what Barrett had spent 8 years collecting. Proof that Broderick Hargrove had stolen Nicholas Caldwell's quantum processing designs, fabricated evidence to discredit him, and systematically erased his contributions from the historical record. But that was just the beginning. The Phoenix Protocol didn't merely aim to expose the truth. It was designed to methodically dismantle everything Broderick Hargrove had built, piece by piece. Trading opens in 3 hours, Barrett told his team. I want every investor, partner, and board member to see these documents before the bell. As dawn broke over New York, Barrett's phone rang. It was Trevor Maxwell. You've gone too far, Caldwell. Trevor's voice was ragged with panic. The SEC is at my door. They're saying my accounts show evidence of insider trading. How unfortunate, Barrett replied coldly. Perhaps you should have considered the consequences before planning to defame my father's memory. This is illegal. You can't just fabricate. I fabricated nothing, Trevor. Every transaction in those accounts happened. The blockchain doesn't lie. If those transactions appear suspicious, well, that's between you and the regulators. You son of a... Barrett ended the call and turned to his financial director. What's the status of the Meridian offer? Hargrove's board is in emergency session now. With Maxwell under investigation and the new documents becoming public, they're in panic mode. Perfect. Barrett checked his watch, his father's watch. Have Simone contact the board chair directly. Inform him that Meridian Capital is prepared to increase their offer in light of recent events, but only if they act within the hour. The trap was set. Meridian Capital, Barrett's shell company, would offer a lifeline to the drowning Hargrove Technologies board. They would accept out of desperation, not realizing that the terms effectively transferred controlling interest of the company to Barrett through a complex web of subsidiaries. By noon, the news had broken. Hargrove Technologies had accepted Meridian Capital's offer for a controlling stake. The stock stabilized briefly on the announcement before analysts began questioning who exactly controlled Meridian. Barrett's phone rang again, Valerie this time. My father had a heart attack, she said without preamble, her voice shaking. He's in the ICU. The doctors say the stress. They don't know if he'll recover. Barrett felt a momentary flicker of something. Not quite remorse, but perhaps the echo of the man he might have been in another life. I'm sorry to hear that, he said finally, surprised to find he meant it. Are you? Valerie's voice hardened. Isn't this exactly what you wanted? My father destroyed. Our company in shambles. Trevor facing criminal charges. Justice isn't about what I want, Valerie. It's about what's right. And who appointed you the arbiter of justice? She demanded. You talk about my father stealing your father's work, but at least no one died in that dispute. Can you say the same about your revenge? The words hit Barrett with unexpected force. He had never intended for Broderick to die. Humbled, yes. Ruined, certainly, but not dead. The doctors are doing everything they can, Valerie continued, her voice breaking. But if he doesn't make it, that blood is on your hands, Barrett. After she hung up, Barrett stood motionless in his command center, surrounded by evidence of his triumph. Everything was proceeding according to plan. Hargrove Technologies was effectively his. Trevor Maxwell was facing federal charges. The truth about his father's invention was finally public. So why did victory taste so hollow? His phone chimed with a message from Talia. It's time to stop, Barry. Dad wouldn't have wanted this. Barrett closed his eyes, memories washing over him. His father's kind smile, his patient explanations of complex engineering principles, his unwavering belief that knowledge should be used to build, not destroy. Sir, Naomi interrupted his thoughts. The transfer of ownership is complete. Hargrove Technologies is now under your control through the Meridian subsidiaries. What are your orders? Barrett stared at the Hargrove Technologies logo displayed on the central monitor. He had dreamed of this moment for over a decade. The moment when he would dismantle the company piece by piece, selling off its assets and erasing Broderick Hargrove's legacy, just as Broderick had tried to erase his father's. Sir, Naomi prompted again. Barrett made his decision. Maintain current operations. No further actions until I give the order. You're pausing the protocol? Naomi asked, surprised. For now. Barrett grabbed his coat. I need to see something for myself. Hours later, Barrett stood in the corridor outside the cardiac intensive care unit, where Broderick Hargrove lay fighting for his life. He hadn't gone inside. He had no right to be there, but something had compelled him to come. Barrett. He turned to see Valerie approaching, her eyes red-rimmed, her normally perfect appearance disheveled. What are you doing here? She asked, confusion and anger battling in her expression. I needed to see, Barrett replied simply. See what? Your handiwork. Her voice was bitter. No, to see if I felt anything. Barrett met her gaze directly. 8 years of planning this revenge. I needed to know if completing it would fill the void my father's death left behind. And does it? Barrett was silent for a long moment. No, he finally admitted. It doesn't bring him back. It doesn't undo the past. Then what was it all for? Valerie asked, genuine bewilderment in her voice. Before Barrett could answer, the hospital corridor was suddenly filled with activity. Doctors rushing into Broderick's room, alarms blaring. Valerie's face drained of color. No, she whispered, pushing past him toward the room. Barrett stepped back, watching through the glass as medical staff fought to save Broderick Hargrove's life. In that moment, watching Valerie's anguish as she might lose her father, something shifted in Barrett's perspective. His phone vibrated. A message from his financial director, board awaiting instructions on company division. How do you want to proceed with dismantling? Barrett stared at the message for a long moment, then at Valerie through the glass, then back at his phone. With deliberate movements, he typed, stand down. Maintain operations. Further instructions tomorrow. As he pocketed his phone, Barrett made a decision. Perhaps there was a path forward that honored his father's memory without causing more destruction. Perhaps. His thoughts were interrupted as Trevor Maxwell appeared at the end of the corridor, flanked by 2 FBI agents. Their eyes met, and Barrett understood immediately. Maxwell had made a deal. In exchange for leniency in his own case, he had provided evidence implicating Barrett in financial manipulation. As the agents approached, Barrett felt a strange sense of calm. The game had changed. His revenge had succeeded, but at a cost he hadn't fully anticipated. Now he would have to face the consequences of his actions. Barrett Caldwell, one of the agents asked. Yes, Barrett replied. We have some questions regarding your involvement with Meridian Capital and certain trading activities related to Hargrove Technologies. Barrett nodded. I'll cooperate fully, he said, casting one last glance at Valerie through the glass. Her father had stabilized, the emergency apparently over for now. As the agents escorted him from the hospital, Barrett's phone chimed with another message from Talia. Whatever happens next, remember who you really are. Not Preston. Not the revenge-driven Barrett. The brother I know is still in there somewhere. Barrett wasn't so sure about that. But as the FBI vehicle pulled away from the hospital, he felt the weight of his 8-year charade finally lifting. Whatever came next, legal battles, public scrutiny, possible criminal charges, at least he would face it as himself. No more masks. No more pretending. The revenge that had defined his existence for so long was complete. Now, he had to decide what would take its place. Chapter 7. The Price of Revenge. The Federal Detention Center was a far cry from Barrett's luxurious penthouses and private jets, but he adapted with the same calculated precision he brought to everything in his life. 3 days after his arrest, he sat across from his criminal defense attorney, Martin Reeves, in a Stark consultation room. The charges are serious, Reeves explained, spreading documents across the table. Securities fraud, wire fraud, identity fraud, corporate espionage. The prosecution is painting you as a man consumed by vengeance who manipulated markets and deployed illegal tactics to destroy Hargrove Technologies. Barrett remained impassive. In your assessment? Some charges will stick, others won't. The SEC evidence is circumstantial. The identity fraud regarding your Preston Davenport persona is more problematic. But the most damaging aspect is Maxwell's testimony. Reeves leaned forward. He claims you explicitly threatened to destroy Hargrove Technologies as revenge for your father. Is telling the truth a crime now? Barrett asked coolly. Reeves sighed. Intent matters in these cases. Pursuing legitimate business strategies is legal. Orchestrating a vendetta that manipulates markets is not. I see. Barrett considered this. What about Hargrove Technologies itself? What's happening with the company? That's the interesting part, Reeves said. Despite the chaos, the Meridian acquisition is being upheld by the courts pending investigation. Technically, you still control the company through your shell corporations, although a court-appointed trustee is managing operations while your assets are frozen. Barrett nodded, processing this information. His revenge had succeeded in giving him control of Broderick's company, but at the cost of his freedom. A Pyrrhic victory. There's something else, Reeves added. Broderick Hargrove's condition has stabilized. He's awake and has already given a statement to prosecutors denying any wrongdoing regarding your father's work. Of course he has, Barrett said bitterly. 30 years of lies won't stop now. On the contrary, a new voice interrupted. Barrett turned to see Talia entering the consultation room, followed by a gray-haired man he didn't recognize. I've been granted access as family, Talia explained, and I've brought someone you need to meet. The older man stepped forward, extending his hand. Dr. Alan Westfield. I worked with your father at Hargrove Technologies in the 90s. Barrett stared at him in shock. You knew my father? I was his closest colleague, Westfield confirmed. And I've spent the past week providing testimony to federal investigators about exactly what happened to Nicholas Caldwell's quantum processing designs. Over the next hour, Westfield revealed a story far more complex than Barrett had imagined. Nicholas Caldwell had indeed developed the revolutionary quantum processing architecture that became Hargrove's breakthrough product, but the truth about its appropriation wasn't as simple as Barrett had believed. Broderick didn't directly steal your father's work, Westfield explained. His deputy, Lawrence Craven, did. Craven copied your father's files and presented them to Broderick as his own work. And Broderick just believed him? Barrett asked skeptically. Initially, but when your father raised concerns, Broderick ordered an internal investigation. That's when things took a dark turn. Craven planted evidence suggesting your father was the one attempting to steal corporate secrets. And Broderick believed that too? Westfield hesitated. Broderick chose to believe it. The technology was too valuable, the potential too great. He convinced himself your father was unstable, desperate to claim credit for work that wasn't his. Convenient, Barrett said coldly. I'm not defending him, Westfield insisted. What happened to your father was a travesty. I tried to speak up at the time, but Craven threatened my career, my family. I stayed silent, and it's haunted me ever since. Why come forward now? Talia asked. Because I've been following Barrett's campaign against Hargrove Technologies. When I realized who was behind it, I knew it was finally time to tell the truth. Barrett leaned back, absorbing this new information. His entire revenge had been predicated on Broderick being the primary villain, directly responsible for his father's downfall. The reality was more nuanced. Broderick had been complicit, even culpable, but not the mastermind Barrett had imagined. This testimony could change everything, Reeves interjected. If Dr. Westfield can prove Broderick knew or should have known the truth about your father's work, it strengthens your case considerably. It's not just my testimony, Westfield added. I've preserved documents from that period, original design notes, emails, meeting minutes. Enough to establish your father's rightful claim to the technology. For the first time since his arrest, Barrett felt a spark of hope. Not for his freedom, but for his father's legacy. The truth might finally come to light. The recognition so long denied might finally be granted. There's one more thing you should know, Talia said quietly. Valerie has been trying to see you. She's been denied access because she's not family, but she's persistent. Barrett frowned. What could she possibly want? To talk. She says there are things you don't know. About her, about your marriage. Our marriage was a lie, Barrett said flatly. 8 years of deception. On both sides. Talia reminded him gently. Maybe it's time to hear her out. Before Barrett could respond, a guard entered to inform them their time was up. As Talia and Westfield prepared to leave, Barrett made a decision. Tell Valerie I'll see her, he told his sister. And Reeves, arrange a meeting with the prosecutors. I want to discuss a potential resolution. A plea deal. Reeves asked, surprised. No, Barrett replied. A different kind of justice. 2 days later, Barrett sat in the same consultation room, waiting. When the door opened and Valerie entered, he was struck by how different she looked. No designer clothes, minimal makeup, her usual confidence replaced by visible uncertainty. Barrett, she said simply, taking the seat across from him. Valerie, he acknowledged. Talia said you wanted to talk. Valerie nodded, gathering her thoughts. My father had another heart attack yesterday. A minor one, but the doctors say his heart is significantly damaged. I'm sorry to hear that, Barrett said, and meant it. Are you? Valerie studied him. The man I lived with for 8 years. Preston would have been. But Barrett Caldwell? The man who orchestrated all this? I don't know him at all. You never knew me, Barrett replied. That was the point. Did not? Valerie challenged. The books you read, the music you loved, the way you'd stay up all night working on your supposed novel, but were actually building your empire. Those things were real, weren't they? Barrett remained silent, uncomfortable with her insight. Your cover story needed consistency, she continued. But somewhere along the way, parts of the real you slipped through. The man who rescued that stray dog during the thunderstorm. The man who remembered every anniversary, even while planning my family's destruction. What's your point, Valerie? My point is, I don't think our entire marriage was a lie. I think somewhere in those 8 years, there were moments of truth between us. Before, she trailed off. Before you started sleeping with Trevor, Barrett finished bluntly. Valerie flinched but didn't look away. Yes, before that. Why did you? Barrett asked, the question escaping before he could stop it. If you saw something real in me, why betray that? Valerie's composure cracked slightly. Because you were never really there, Barrett. Physically present, but emotionally unreachable. I thought it was because of your writing struggles, but now I understand you were always looking through me, past me, at your real target. The truth of her words stung more than Barrett expected. And Trevor was, she continued, convenient, available, not plotting your family's downfall. Barrett suggested sarcastically. Present, Valerie corrected softly. Just present. It wasn't about love. It was about not feeling invisible in my own marriage. The irony wasn't lost on Barrett. He, the invisible billionaire, had made his wife feel invisible. Perhaps they'd both been wearing masks all along. I didn't come here to justify what I did, Valerie said after a moment. I came because of what Dr. Westfield revealed about my father and yours. Barrett straightened. You've spoken to Westfield? He came to see my father in the hospital. They talked for hours. Then my father asked to see me. Valerie took a deep breath. Barrett, my father is prepared to publicly acknowledge your father's contribution to the quantum processing architecture. He wants to make amends before it's too late. Barrett stared at her in disbelief. After 30 years of denial, after destroying Nicholas Caldwell's reputation and driving him to suicide, Broderick Hargrove was finally willing to admit the truth. Why now? Barrett demanded. Because he's facing his own mortality? Because he's lost his company? Because the evidence is about to become public anyway. All of those things probably Valerie admitted, but also because he's had time to reflect on the kind of legacy he wants to leave, the kind of example he's set. She met Barrett's gaze directly. People can change, Barrett. Even my father. Even you. What exactly is he offering? A public statement acknowledging your father as the primary inventor of the quantum processing architecture. renaming the Hargrove Quantum Division as the Caldwell Institute for Quantum Innovation, and a personal apology to your family for the way your father was treated. It was more than Barrett had ever expected, the recognition his father deserved, the restoration of his legacy. But it came at the end of a bitter, destructive journey that had left all of them scarred. And what does he want in return? Barrett asked, suspicious. Nothing specific, though I think he hopes it might influence how you proceed with the company you now control. Barrett considered this carefully. I need to think about it. Of course. Valerie stood to leave, then hesitated. For what it's worth, Barrett, I am sorry. Not just for the affair, but for not seeing who you really were, both the man behind the mask and the pain that drove you. After she left, Barrett remained in the consultation room, his mind racing. The landscape had shifted dramatically. His revenge had succeeded beyond his expectations, giving him control of Hargrove Technologies. But the personal cost had been immense. His freedom, his identity, perhaps even pieces of his humanity. Now he faced a choice. Continue down the path of destruction, dismantling the company piece by piece as he planned, or forge a different legacy, one that honored his father's brilliance by building rather than destroying. As the guard came to return him to his cell, Barrett made his decision. The time for masks and deception was over. Whatever came next, he would face it as himself. Neither Preston Davenport nor the revenge-driven Barrett Caldwell, but the man he might yet become. Chapter 8. The Revelation. The courtroom fell silent as Barrett Caldwell took the stand. 6 weeks had passed since his arrest, and the trial had captured national attention. A modern Greek tragedy of revenge, deception, and corporate warfare. Barrett had declined a plea deal, choosing instead to face the charges directly. With Dr. Westfield's testimony and evidence supporting his claims about his father's stolen work, the narrative had shifted from portraying Barrett as a vengeful manipulator to something more complex. A son seeking justice for a brilliant father whose legacy had been erased. As Barrett was sworn in, he caught sight of familiar faces in the gallery. Talia, watchful and supportive. Naomi, his loyal assistant, now managing what remained of his legal business affairs. And, surprisingly, Valerie, sitting alone near the back. Mr. Caldwell, his attorney began, could you explain to the court why you created the identity of Preston Davenport? Barrett looked directly at the jury. To uncover the truth about what happened to my father, Nicholas Caldwell. He was a brilliant engineer whose quantum processing architecture was appropriated by Hargrove Technologies in the 1990s. When he challenged this theft, he was systematically discredited, his career destroyed. He took his own life when I was 19. And you believe Broderick Hargrove was personally responsible for this? I did, Barrett acknowledged. For many years, that belief drove every decision I made. I built Phoenix Innovations using my father's unrealized designs, keeping my identity secret. When I had accumulated enough resources, I created the Preston Davenport identity to infiltrate the Hargrove family. With the specific intent of destroying Hargrove Technologies, Barrett paused, choosing his words carefully. Initially, yes, I wanted justice for my father. I believed that meant dismantling what Broderick Hargrove had built on my father's stolen work. And your marriage to Valerie Hargrove, was that part of your plan? Barrett glanced at Valerie briefly before answering. It began that way. I approached her with calculated intent. But over time, he hesitated. The lines blurred. Preston Davenport was a construct, but living as him for 8 years affected me in ways I hadn't anticipated. The questioning continued for hours, covering Barrett's business tactics, the Phoenix Protocol, and the complex financial maneuvers that had ultimately given him control of Hargrove Technologies. Throughout, Barrett was honest about his actions while explaining the context behind them. When the prosecution began their cross-examination, the tone shifted dramatically. Mr. Caldwell, the prosecutor began, you've presented yourself as a son seeking justice. But isn't it true that your actions went far beyond exposing the truth about your father's work? I pursued multiple avenues to achieve justice, Barrett replied evenly, including deliberately marrying a woman under false pretenses, including orchestrating the financial ruin of numerous individuals associated with Hargrove Technologies. including actions that contributed to Broderick Hargrove's heart attacks. Barrett didn't flinch. I take responsibility for my actions. All of them, even those that nearly killed a man. I never intended physical harm to come to Broderick Hargrove or anyone else. My objective was to reveal the truth and reclaim my father's legacy. The prosecutor approached with a document. Yet in this email to your executive team, you specifically stated, Hargrove will know what it feels like to lose everything, just as my father did. He looked up at Barrett. Does that sound like someone interested merely in truth and justice? Or does it sound like revenge? Barrett was silent for a moment. It was both, he finally admitted. I wanted justice, but I also wanted revenge. I won't deny that. No further questions, the prosecutor said, returning to his table. As Barrett stepped down from the witness stand, he felt a strange sense of liberation. For years, he had lived behind carefully constructed facades, calculating every word and action. Now, finally, the truth was exposed, not just about his father's stolen work, but about his own actions and motives. The following day, in a surprising development, Broderick Hargrove appeared in court, frail but determined. Over his doctor's objections, he had insisted on testifying. I've come to set the record straight, Broderick began, his voice weaker than the commanding tone Barrett remembered. 30 years ago, a terrible injustice was done to Nicholas Caldwell under my watch, with my knowledge, and ultimately, with my blessing. The courtroom stirred with murmurs as Broderick detailed how his ambitious deputy had presented Nicholas Caldwell's revolutionary quantum processing design as his own, how Broderick had initially believed him, and how, when confronted with evidence of the truth, he had made the devastating choice to protect the company's interests over doing what was right. I convinced myself it was a gray area, Broderick testified, that Caldwell's work had been developed using company resources, that the final implementation had required our team's refinements. But the core breakthrough, the insight that made everything possible, that was Nicholas Caldwell's. And I failed to acknowledge that. Broderick turned directly to Barrett. I can't undo the past. I can't bring your father back, but I can finally tell the truth. The quantum processing architecture that built Hargrove Technologies was your father's creation. He deserved the recognition, the patents, the place in history that was denied him. As Broderick's testimony concluded, Barrett felt a complex mix of emotions. Vindication for his father, a hollow sense of victory, and an unexpected weight lifting from his shoulders. The truth he had fought so long to expose was finally public, acknowledged by the very man who had buried it. That evening, as Barrett was being escorted back to detention, his attorney rushed up with news. The judge is considering dismissing several of the most serious charges. Broderick's testimony changed everything. What about Hargrove Technologies? Barrett asked. The Meridian acquisition. Still in legal limbo. But with both you and Broderick now cooperating with authorities, there's talk of a potential negotiated resolution. 3 days later, Barrett sat in a conference room with his legal team, prosecutors, and representatives from Hargrove Technologies, including Broderick himself. On the table was a proposed settlement that would resolve both the criminal charges against Barrett and the future of the company. The terms are straightforward, the lead prosecutor explained. Mr. Caldwell pleads guilty to reduced charges of securities manipulation and identity fraud with a recommended sentence of time, served plus 3 years probation. In exchange, he agrees to a structured divestiture of his interest in Hargrove Technologies, with provisions for establishing the Caldwell Institute for Quantum Innovation as a joint research foundation between Phoenix and Hargrove. Barrett studied the documents, particularly the sections detailing how his father's legacy would be preserved and honored. Additionally, the Hargrove attorney added, Mr. Hargrove is prepared to issue a public statement acknowledging Nicholas Caldwell's contributions and the company's historical failure to properly credit his work. And the current employees? Barrett asked, what happens to them? The restructuring plan preserves the majority of positions, the attorney assured him. Both companies continue to operate independently, but establish the Caldwell Institute as a collaborative venture. Barrett looked across the table at Broderick, seeing not the arrogant titan of industry who had destroyed his father, but an aging man confronting the consequences of his past actions. "Well, Mr. Caldwell," the prosecutor prompted, "do we have an agreement?" Barrett thought of his father, not the broken man of his final days, but the passionate engineer who had believed knowledge should be used to build, not destroy. He thought of the 8 years spent as Preston Davenport, the life unlived while pursuing his vendetta. And he thought, unexpectedly, of Valerie, the woman he'd married for revenge but had, against all odds, come to care for in his own complicated way. "We have an agreement," Barrett said finally, "with one addition." He turned to Broderick. "I want the full story published, not just an acknowledgement of my father's work, but a detailed account of what happened. No more secrets, no more half-truths." Broderick nodded slowly. "Agreed." As the meeting concluded and papers were signed, Barrett felt neither the triumph he had once imagined nor the bitter defeat he had sometimes feared. Instead, he experienced something unexpected, the first fragile sense of closure. Outside the conference room, he found Valerie waiting. "I heard about the settlement," she said. "It's a good outcome. Better than any of us deserve, perhaps." Barrett studied her, seeing beyond the polished exterior to the complex woman beneath, flawed and human, just as he was. "What happens now?" she asked. "Between us, I mean." "I don't know," Barrett answered honestly. "Too much has happened. Too many lies on both sides." "Yes," Valerie agreed softly. "Perhaps some damage can't be undone. But some truths can still be acknowledged," Barrett added. "Including this one. Whatever else our marriage was, there were moments of something real. I won't pretend otherwise." Valerie nodded, tears in her eyes. "For what it's worth, I would have fallen in love with Barrett Caldwell if you'd given me the chance to know him." "We'll never know," Barrett replied. "That's part of the price we both pay." As they parted ways, Barrett understood that some chapters were ending while others were just beginning. The mask of Preston Davenport was gone forever. The revenge that had defined him for so long was complete, though not in the way he had envisioned. Now he faced the most daunting challenge of all, discovering who Barrett Caldwell might become when unburdened by the past, when defined by more than vengeance and deception. It was a question he was finally ready to answer. Chapter 9. The Aftermath. 6 months after the settlement, Barrett stood on the observation deck of the newly inaugurated Caldwell Institute for Quantum Innovation. The glass and steel structure rose from the Phoenix Innovations campus in Seattle, its architecture a striking blend of forward-thinking design and subtle homage to the past. Inside, dozens of the world's leading quantum physicists and engineers were already at work, advancing the technological frontier that Nicholas Caldwell had helped pioneer 3 decades earlier. On the main wall of the atrium hung a large portrait of Barrett's father, alongside a comprehensive display detailing his contributions to quantum processing architecture and the true history of how his work had transformed the industry. "Impressive, isn't it?" Talia said, joining Barrett at the railing. "Dad would have loved this place." Barrett nodded, taking in the bustling research floors below. "It's a better memorial than revenge ever could have been." In the months since the trial, Barrett had undergone a profound transformation. The settlement had allowed him to avoid prison time beyond what he'd already served, though his reputation remained complex. Part villain, part vindicated son, part brilliant businessman who had built 2 separate technology empires. Phoenix Innovations continued to thrive under his leadership, while Hargrove Technologies had stabilized under new management following Broderick's retirement. The Caldwell Institute, jointly funded by both companies, stood as a bridge between them, a testament to how tragedy could ultimately yield something constructive. "Have you seen today's Wall Street Journal?" Talia asked, handing him a folded newspaper. The headline read, "Caldwell's Quantum Leap: How the Tech Industry's Most Notorious Revenge Plot Gave Rise to Its Most Promising Innovation Center." Barrett skimmed the article, which offered a surprisingly balanced account of his story, acknowledging both the extremity of his methods and the legitimacy of his grievances. The piece ended with quotes from several Institute researchers, all expressing excitement about working in an environment where Nicholas Caldwell's groundbreaking approaches were being honored and expanded upon. "Public opinion seems to be shifting in your favor," Talia observed. I'm not sure I deserve that, Barrett replied. The means don't justify the ends, regardless of how things turned out. No, Talia agreed, but recognizing that shows how far you've come. Their conversation was interrupted by Barrett's assistant, who approached with an apologetic expression. I'm sorry to disturb you, sir, but there's a situation requiring your attention. The Palmer Group is attempting a hostile takeover of Sullivan Medical Technologies. Lawrence Sullivan, the former CEO who had partnered with Barrett during his campaign against Hargrove, had recently revived his family's company with Barrett's backing. Now it seemed they faced a threat from the notoriously aggressive Palmer Group. What's our exposure? Barrett asked. Minimal financially, but Sullivan personally reached out. He's asking for your guidance, not your resources. Barrett considered this. 6 months ago, he might have seen the situation as an opportunity to deploy the same ruthless tactics he'd used against Hargrove. Now, he found himself hesitating. Tell Sullivan I'll call him this afternoon, Barrett decided, and prepare a defensive strategy that protects their research division above all else. That's what matters most. As his assistant departed, Talia gave him an approving look. Building rather than destroying. It suits you. I'm trying, Barrett acknowledged. They continued their tour of the facility, stopping occasionally to speak with researchers eager to share their projects with the Institute's founder. In these interactions, Barrett found an unexpected satisfaction, the genuine respect of brilliant minds appreciating not his wealth or power, but his understanding of their work and his father's legacy within it. Later that afternoon, as Barrett prepared to leave, his security chief approached with an update he'd been expecting but dreading. Mrs. Caldwell's divorce filing has been processed, sir. The papers require your signature. Though the settlement included their separation, finalizing the divorce had been delayed by legal complications surrounding Barrett's temporary incarceration and the complex untangling of which assets belonged to Preston Davenport versus Barrett Caldwell. Thank you, Barrett said, taking the envelope. Is there anything else? Just this, the security chief handed over a smaller envelope. It was delivered with the papers, but separately addressed. Alone in his office, Barrett opened the divorce documents first, signing where indicated. 8 years of marriage, built on deception, sustained through complicated emotions, and now ending with surprising civility. The terms were fair, with Valerie claiming far less than she might have demanded. The second envelope contained a single folded note in Valerie's handwriting. Barrett, as we formally end what began under such false pretenses, I find myself thinking about truth. The truth about your father that you fought so hard to reveal. The truth about my father that I'm still learning to accept. And the truth about us, that somewhere beneath the lies and betrayals, there might have been something worth salvaging if we'd both been different people. I won't pretend I didn't hurt you, or that you didn't hurt me. We both know better. But I've come to believe that understanding why someone causes pain matters almost as much as the pain itself. I'm returning to London next month to restart my life away from all this. Perhaps someday we'll encounter each other as the people we're becoming rather than the people we were. Until then, I wish you peace, something I suspect neither of us has known for a very long time. Valerie. Barrett read the note twice before carefully folding it and placing it in his desk drawer. There was a time when he might have dismissed her words as manipulation, another Hargrove attempt to rewrite history. Now, he recognized the same complicated truth she did, that their relationship had been neither entirely false nor entirely real, but something uniquely complex, forged in unusual circumstances. His phone chimed with a notification that Broderick Hargrove had been admitted to the hospital again. Despite their history, Barrett had maintained a distant but respectful connection with his former father-in-law as Broderick's health declined. The older man's public acknowledgement of Nicholas Caldwell's contributions had not erased the past, but it had allowed for a fragile reconciliation. Barrett decided he would send flowers but not visit. Some boundaries were better maintained, some distances more appropriate than forced closeness. Broderick was Valerie's concern now, not his. As evening fell, Barrett found himself drawn to the Institute's memorial wall, where visitors could learn the full story of Nicholas Caldwell's innovations and the long journey to recognize them. He stood before his father's photograph, seeing in it not just the brilliant engineer, but the kind man who had taught him that knowledge should elevate humanity, not serve personal vendettas. "I think I understand now, Dad," Barrett said quietly to the empty hallway. "It wasn't about making them pay. It was about making your work matter." A security guard passed by, nodding respectfully before continuing his rounds, leaving Barrett alone with his thoughts. The revenge that had consumed him for so long had ultimately given way to something more meaningful. Not forgiveness, exactly, but a recognition that moving forward required more strength than looking backward. He would never forget what Broderick Hargrove had done, never fully absolve Valerie's betrayal, never completely separate Trevor Maxwell's actions from their consequences. But he could choose what defined his future, and that future would not be built on retribution. 2 weeks later, Barrett received word that Broderick Hargrove had passed away peacefully in his sleep. The news arrived as Barrett was reviewing plans for the Institute's next phase of expansion. The official statement from Hargrove Technologies acknowledged Broderick's complicated legacy, including his late-in-life admissions regarding Nicholas Caldwell's work. The financial press noted the irony that the company Broderick had built now partially funded an institute named for the man whose work he had once appropriated. Barrett attended the funeral, standing at a respectful distance as Valerie received condolences. Their eyes met briefly across the cemetery, an unspoken acknowledgement passing between them. Not forgiveness. Neither was capable of that yet, but understanding. They had both been changed by what had happened. As Barrett prepared to leave, Trevor Maxwell approached him, the first time they had encountered each other since the trial. Trevor had avoided prison through his cooperation with authorities, but had lost his position and reputation in the process. "Caldwell," Trevor said stiffly, "I didn't expect to see you here." "I came to pay my respects," Barrett replied neutrally. "To the company he built, if not the man himself." Trevor studied him. "You won, you know. Everything you wanted. The company, your father's recognition, your revenge against all of us." Barrett shook his head. "If that's what you think this was about, you still don't understand. Then explain it to me," Trevor challenged. "What was it all for if not revenge?" Barrett considered the question carefully. "It began as revenge," he admitted, "but it ended as something else, a reckoning. Not just for Broderick or Hargrove Technologies, but for me, for who I became while pursuing vengeance." "And who is that exactly?" Trevor asked skeptically. Barrett looked across the cemetery to where Valerie stood beside her father's casket. "Someone who finally understands that the most important legacy isn't what you take from others, but what you build yourself." He left Trevor without another word, walking back to his waiting car. The driver had instructions to take him directly to the airport. The Palmer Group's attempted takeover of Sullivan Medical had escalated, and Barrett was needed in Boston to help formulate a defense. This time, however, his strategy would be different. Not destruction, but protection. Not vengeance, but value. The lessons of the past 6 months had changed his approach fundamentally. As the car pulled away from the cemetery, Barrett received a message from Talia. The Sullivan situation looked serious. "What's your plan?" Barrett thought carefully before responding. "To do what Dad would have done. Build something better." In the distance, he could see Valerie watching his departure, a solitary figure against the gray horizon. They would likely never repair what had been broken between them. Too much deception, too much betrayal on both sides. But they could acknowledge the truth of what had happened and who they had been to each other. That, Barrett had come to believe, was its own form of justice. Not the fiery retribution he had once craved, but the cold clarity of truth finally exposed to light. His revenge was complete, but not in the way he had imagined. The Hargrove Empire had not been destroyed, but transformed. His father's legacy had not been avenged, but honored. And Barrett himself had not found satisfaction in his enemy's downfall, but in the future, he was now free to build. As Seattle vanished behind him and new challenges beckoned ahead, Barrett Caldwell finally released the last vestiges of Preston Davenport, the mask he had worn for so long, and embraced the man he had become. Neither the vengeful son nor the deceptive husband, but something entirely new. Someone his father might have recognized. Someone he was still learning to know. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there.